Do you want to reduce your energy bills? Or maybe you want to use greener energy? Go solar and get a discount. Right now, Which members can get a 7.5% discount on solar panels and their installation if you use Heatable, a Which trusted trader approved service. You can also include a storage battery and EV charger, handy if you're looking at making the switch to an electric car. To make use of this exclusive offer, simply head to which.co.uk/solar-offer. That's which.co.uk/solar-offer before the 30th of September 2025. And if you're not already a Which member, you can grab a year's membership for 50% off the usual price. To do that, go to which.co.uk/podcast offer to get involved. Start your solar journey today. Go solar and get a discount with Which.
Bank branches closing, paper statements axed, text alerts no longer coming through. Is mobile banking fast becoming the only way to manage our cash? Welcome to Which Money. Hello, I'm Lucia Ariano and welcome to our deep dive into the decline of traditional banking services. And with me today we have Which experts Chiara, Cavaglieri and Josh Wilson. Hello both.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mean, shall we start with a general picture? Chiara, you've done a big survey and you've got a lot of thoughts from Which members on banking services. Shall we start here? How are they feeling about them?
So actually, this is one where members came to us first. Doesn't happen always that way, but we had a lot of members who were pretty cheesed off with First Direct specifically. I think a lot of Which members bank with First Direct, Nationwide, banks like that, and so many of them contacted me directly to say that they were annoyed that they'd heard they would lose these free SMS alerts. These are just weekly balance alerts, and I think some people can get mini statements from them as well. And they just couldn't understand why they were losing this useful, seemingly fairly straightforward service. So they wanted me to ask why. I asked some of our members to get in touch and tell me if they had also lost a service or were about to lose a service that they really enjoyed or really benefited from. And there were a lot of responses. I was quite surprised. Sometimes really small services being cut, things I wouldn't really think about, and some of them were bigger, so face-to-face appointments, for example. But we got the sense that actually there was some more digging to do. So we did a bigger survey of our Connect panel, and yeah, it was quite revealing.
I'm glad you mentioned, bank branches closing and ATMs closing, because our listeners will know that over the years we've spoken about those a lot. But services like the ones you mentioned, these seem kind of new. I mean, the closures or the ending to these services seem new. Is that the case?
I don't think it's so much that these services being cut is new, but I think it's becoming more noticeable. So some things we've been aware of for a while. Lots of people have complained about losing paper statements, for example, or losing them as default and having to specifically ask for them to be sent to them. But actually there's a few more things, some of the things I hadn't thought of before. Countercointing machines at a branch.
That was one that stuck in my mind.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Obviously I haven't thought about it myself because it's not something I do, but a couple of people actually, not just one, a couple had mentioned it specifically. One of them was a kind of box collector for a charity, and she was joint secretary for the Lifeboat charity, and she said it was really easy and kind of quite a nice part of her week that she'd just pop into her HSBC. The coin counting machine would do all the boring stuff for her. She'd get a little receipt at the end, job's done. And now it's a real faff. I think the first time she was told that she'd have to just count it herself and take it to a counter. I think now she gets a bit more help. But it's just one of those things where she thought, I use it, I know someone else uses it, there's always someone using it when I pop in. Why is it gone? And I think the answer is always tough luck, basically, or a more polite version of that. There doesn't seem to be a way to stop it from happening because they're so seemingly small. They're not core services. They're not your core bank account, your core app, core telephone banking services. They're usually the face-to-face services that go first. And I think people are just a bit fed up.
That does seem like quite a niche example, but looking at the stats from our survey, quite a substantial amount of people aren't happy. I've got here that 35% said they don't feel valued by their banks. 22% are satisfied with branch banking. Which, does that imply that that 78% aren't satisfied?
Yeah, not far off. So I think the point that we were trying to make in the story is that satisfaction levels, triple when you're talking about online banking and mobile banking. So I think the point that I wanted to make was that there does seem to be a two-tier system emerging. It varies, obviously, from bank to bank. Some banks are better than others at telephone banking, for example. But I do think there's a case to be made that there's a sense among customers that they're not as important if they don't use an app for their banking or online banking, and that they're probably going to expect shorter telephone banking hours, for example. That was one that came up a few times. Or that it might be harder to get a face-to-face appointment in a branch, or that their branch might have shorter opening hours, or that certain services they used to rely on will be gone. I just think that came through again and again and again when I spoke to people.
So, it does seem clear that digital services are being prioritised. Why is that?
So I think what's driving this is that there has been reduced footfall in retail bank branches. And banks are seeing this, and they're seeing that there has been pretty wide take-up by the public for digital banking services. A lot of people do use online banking. A lot of people have banking apps on their phones. And I think a lot of banks are maybe seeing this as an opportunity to reduce their retail footprint. I would say that's probably the main driver. It's to some extent, it is a bit of a cost-cutting exercise.
And what more can you tell us about bank branch closures? Because as I mentioned, we have talked about this a lot on the show, but not recently. So, has it slowed down, or is it still accelerating as it was?
So as the data journalist at Which, it's my job to track the bank branch closures across the country. And I can tell you that we're now on 6,510 branch closures since January 2015. Wow. That's about 51 closures every month, and that's about 66% of the nation's total branch network that was operating in 2015.
Wow,
so it's been really substantial.
Yeah.
It's been really substantial. And there has been a slight slowdown over the past couple of years, but we're still talking hundreds of branch closures every year. So it's still substantial. And it's not just the bank branches either. It's also ATMs. We've also found that 18,000 free-to-use ATMs have been lost in the UK between July 2018 and December 2024. So it's really, there has been a widespread loss of physical access to cash services in the UK.
And does that mean that more and more people across the country are being left without a face-to-face bank or even without an ATM?
Absolutely. That's absolutely the case. I ran a survey of Which members earlier this year, which found that 40% of our members told us that they have lost access to their local bank branch over the past 5 years. So it really is substantial, and it's something that affects consumers, but particularly older and more vulnerable groups of individuals who research has shown have a tendency to prefer face-to-face banking services, and also are more likely to rely on physical cash for their day-to-day life.
So what are the alternatives, if at all? What other options are there for people who are without now a local bank branch or an ATM?
So there are a few alternatives. So, for example, if you go to your local post office, most of the time you'll be able to do very basic counter services there, mostly just withdrawing and depositing money, paying bills, not really much else. Banks will also sometimes do fleets of mobile banking vans, which will visit certain communities on certain days of the week, but you need to be really aware of when and where that's happening. But the most substantial solution that's been put forward by banks and by other organisations like the Financial Conduct Authority is community banking hubs, which is, they're essentially a shared banking space where consumers can go. Doesn't matter who you bank with, doesn't matter which bank you're a member of, you can go there, you'll be able to do basic counter services, and you should also be able to, on a rotational basis, they will have banking representatives from the major banks, where you'll be able to do face-to-face banking that should be similar to the sort of face-to-face banking that you would have been able to do in your standard physical, like Santander branch or HSBC branch.
And you recently went to one of those, didn't you, in Welling? How was it?
I did, that's right. So which sent me on a little outing to a community banking hub in Welling, which is in southeast London, to get an idea of how they work and whether they're fit for purpose, essentially. And the Welling Community Hub is a really interesting one. It's on the Welling High Street. It opened at the back end of 2023 after Welling had lost its, I believe it, Welling had lost its last bank branch by the time the Community Hub opened. And it actually opened on the site of what had been the Barclays branch for Welling. And it's now the case that for the entire constituency, actually, of Bexley and Sidcup, there's only one bank branch remaining, and it's set to close next month. The hub in Welling will be one of the only locations that people in the area will be able to do any physical face-to-face banking in. So it was a really interesting visit, actually. It felt very like a traditional bank branch, if a little bit on the small side.
Well, that's interesting, because actually I'm pleased you said that, because when you say community banking hub, it kind of makes you, made me think of, village hall space or other community spaces. I'm imagining people banking in a leisure centre or something.
So this is really interesting, because a community banking hub, the one in Welling was set up on what was previously a Barclays bank branch, but that's not going to be the case for all community hubs. So, if you were to go to your nearest local one, it might be in what was previously a community centre or a village hall. I think some have even been set up in churches, some of them temporarily. A lot of the time they're temporarily set up in a particular location with plans to move them then to a more permanent location that would be more similar to the premises that a traditional banking branch would have been located on, if that makes sense.
It feels a little bit like a step back in time. Do you know what I mean? Does it?
Yeah.
I think it kind of feels a bit kind of wartime or something like that. Chiara, you're laughing. I mean,
I kind of know what you mean, but actually, I think strangely, it is a step forward in the sense that when Josh refers to, people seeing their community banker in a library, or that happened in lots of rural locations and others. But I do think the idea of the banking hubs, at least, they're being quite picky about the locations they're choosing for that reason. They acknowledge that these buildings need to be fit for purpose. I only say that because a million years ago, I wrote about post office banking, because at the time banks were really trying to persuade everyone that it was fine to cut lots of branches because you could use a post office, for your banking, but they were not fit for purpose by any means. No wheelchair access, not private, cramped. You're queuing up for your stamps or to deliver your parcel, and then talk to someone about, I don't know, being recently bereaved, just really inappropriate spaces. So the idea of a banking hub is to move away from that and to make sure that there is a sort of suitable premise. I don't think that's going to be easy in every location, which is probably why it takes, a while for them to find. They're speeding things up now, right, Josh? But it was quite a slow start. So I think being confident about the type of building they're choosing is part of the process. So hopefully they will be, suitable buildings. And a former bank obviously makes a lot of sense because they're already set up that way. And there should be always a private space, and they should have considerations for disabled customers, etc.
On that note, I will also say that when I was writing my piece, I did speak to Cash Access UK, who they're the ones who manage the rollout of community hubs across the country. And they did tell me that the majority of community hubs are being designed with disability access in mind. And they told me that every hub should be equipped with hearing loops, and where possible, most hubs should be wheelchair friendly. And I did notice as well that if you go on the Cash Access UK website, which has a list of all the currently active community hubs, if you go onto a particular community hubs page, so if you were to look up your nearest community hub, it will tell you all of the disability access information on that page. So it will tell you whether it's wheelchair accessible, it will tell you whether there's hearing loops, that kind of thing. So they do have that front of mind, which was reassuring.
Well, I want to hear more about your experience, and I know you spoke to some people who use the hub too. So before we go there, let's just hear your chat with Rizwan, the Community Hub Manager. Let's take a listen now.
I'm the banking hub operator since November 2023. And plus, we are working with the different community bankers on a daily basis. Like on Monday, we have HSBC, Tuesday, NatWest, Lloyds on Wednesday, Barclays on Thursday, and half-day Santanders, they come on Friday. But in respect of the bank, like what days they are going to be here to see the community banker, but they can come and use the post office counter services between Monday to Friday. For example, Monday is HSBC day. So if they want to see the community banker, they can come to see them on Monday. But if they want to do with their own personal transactions or business deposits or check their balances, they can come Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Do you know much about how this community hub came into being? Like, was there a local campaign? Was there a campaign group? Did local politicians get involved?
Yes, the local MP, Louis French, he was quite involved to get the community, to get the banking hub in Welling, because the last bank was closed in 2023, and the community do requires the banking hub. So especially our vulnerable and elderly customers, they want to withdraw their pensions, and they don't trust on ATMs machines, and plus they want someone to see them face to face rather than talk to the machine. So that's why we are here for. Yes, local MPs, they have done they have made some local campaigns. They were in contact with Catch Access UK on the website.
And I mean, do you think that it's important for the local members of the local community to still have a place to do physical banking?
100%, it is very important. It is essential as well as important. It is essential as well. Banking hub has to be in the community. Reason because of the way the bank and building societies, they are closing their branches in different areas in the entire UK. So if the local community, they are out of bank, they don't know where to go. They have to go to the nearest town centers, or they have to travel miles away, which is not a good customer journey for them. Kind of, as I mentioned here about the vulnerable customers, we might be the only contact for them to see on daily face-to-face routines. Especially the pensioners. Our pensioners, they come and they withdraw their pensions from here. If we are not here, if the banking hub is not in the town center, they have to go to the nearest bank, which is quite far distances. So yes, it is very important and essential to keep the banking hub in the town center.
So what kind of area would you say that this community hub serves? Like, is it all of Welling? Does it do you see people coming in from even further afield, would you say?
No, we have seen people, they are coming from further places as well, but most of them, they are within the community, nearby the areas, we have quite residential areas here that people, they are coming to withdraw their pension. Local businesses, they want to deposit their money in their accounts.
So do you do business banking here?
We do business banking.
Business banking.
We do business banking here. People, they are coming here to deposit their money in their business accounts, in their personal accounts. People, they want to deposit their checks. They are coming to do the checks here. We do bill payments as well. We do pay points and pay station.
In terms of the physical bank branches that used to be here, have you noticed, over the past few years, did you notice them closing down?
Yeah, when we moved to here in Welling Banking Hub, there was no bank and building society left over here. So people, they have to travel for other various reasons. They go to Bexley Town Centre.
How often is it, or how many instances do you get of, say, someone coming in to do some banking, but it's something that you end up not being able to help them with?
What we do normally, if they have to do anything with their banking needs, we have to refer those customers to our community bankers. And then most of the transactions, most of them, their needs, the community banker resolved in branch.
Yeah.
If something is not in our hand, or we cannot do it in banking hub, then we divert those customers to the nearest bank.
Are customers able to book in advance if they want to see, because obviously I know that the bank representatives are only in on a certain day of the week, but could someone book in to see that person on that particular day?
Some of the banks, they do provide that service to book in appointments. Like I know that Barclays, they do provide that service. But if someone wants to walk in, they can walk in and they can wait here, and as soon as the community banker is free, they can directly serve them it.
Oh, a huge thank you to Rizwan for chatting with us. I mean, that sounds relatively positive. What did you make of your experience there, Josh, on a whole?
So it was really interesting. When I went in, I was really reminded, it was almost like a cross between a post office and a traditional bank branch. But imagine a post office, doesn't have the envelopes and the stationery and everything. There's every community hub should have a counter service, which this one did in Welling. And the counter service is run by post office staff, not banking staff. And you will be able to, at the counter, that's where you do your basic, everyday banking services, like withdrawals, deposits, paying bills, not too much else. That's what you do at the counter service. Now, there should also be a private space. In the case of Welling, it was a glass room that had frosted glass walls, so you couldn't see directly in. And it was a private space with a big table, chairs, laptop, telephone, and that's where each day of the week there would be a representative from different banks there. So the day I went on a Friday, and that was Santander's day.
And so can you expect that your bank, whichever household bank that you used to bank with on the high street, would be represented at one of these hubs?
So this is one of the issues with community hubs, is that you won't get every bank represented by them. And what I was told by Cash Access UK is that they look at which banks were present in, let's say, the town that they're thinking of putting a community hub in. Based on that should be the banks that are then present in the community hub. This is obviously not ideal for a few different reasons because, for one thing, there's always going to be some people who are with a bank that's not being represented by that hub. And the fact as well that community hubs don't just tend to serve that one, say, town or area that it's located in, but they also tend to serve the surrounding like local population areas as well. There are going to be cases where banks aren't represented and there are members of the local community who are with a bank that is not represented.
I mean, it does sound like banks are trying to fill the gap that they've created. I mean, are they aware then of the impact of all these closures and are they really doing their bit to fill the gap?
Well, I'm a cynic, so I looked into this a while ago, and to me it was a box ticking exercise, but they do in theory do impact analysis when they announce a closure. So in theory, they're meant to say, what the footfall is, what services are being used, the age and the age bracket and vulnerability status of those customers. But I think, I can't remember when I looked at this a few years ago, but I remember there wasn't a single case of a decision being reversed, which I think speaks volumes. If you do an impact assessment and 100% of your impact assessments means you still close the branch, then to me, it's a box ticking exercise. But it's a commercial decision fundamentally. It's a commercial decision. If you don't want to keep a branch open, broadly speaking, you don't have to. There are now stronger rules in place, thanks to our campaign win, when it comes to the provision of cash, which branches become a part of. So I think, banking hubs, we'll see more of them, and hopefully they'll be hugely successful, and we're all really happy about them because it's that or almost nothing when it comes to face-to-face services anyway. I think it's a tricky one because a bank account feels like such a fundamental basic right now. You need one to do so many things that it becomes an essential service. What
about, say, the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA? Are they present within all of this? Do they have an angle?
So I have spoken to the Financial Conduct Authority about this because they do have, these community hubs are within their remit. So one of the issues that I raised with them, and is an issue that exists within community hubs, is that there's no minimum set of services that they need to provide when it comes to the banking representatives, where you go and sit in a private room. So, for example, a lot of the time you won't be able to do some of the very more advanced things that you would have been able to do in a traditional retail banking branch. Now, this could be things like sorting out probate. This could be things like trying to secure a mortgage, things you would have been able to do at a traditional bank branch, but that you may not be able to do even with your banking representative at a community hub. I did speak to the FCA about this and asked them, are you going to introduce minimum levels of provision that these banks need to provide, the community bankers need to provide? And I was told it's something that they're looking into, There's nothing concrete planned on it at the moment, essentially.
One thing that really winds me up is when a bank insists that you do something in a branch. I have to admit, it doesn't happen very often. And you know, more and more you can do everything online with them. But occasionally you
Like
can't.
what?
So actually, a few years ago, someone wrote to me to complain because she had been asked to pop into a branch to register a power of attorney. And she was nowhere near a branch. It was such a faff, not only taking time off holiday and finding a time when her and her brother could both be there, they both had to be present. She said it was so annoying because so many of this particular this particular bank branches have closed. And I just thought the cheek of insisting that you have to go into a branch when you've removed them all.
Well, that's a really good example. And I feel like whenever we've been having these examples throughout today's show, it does really just illustrate what we're talking about. And just to go back then to talking about the hubs, who did you speak to at the hubs? You know, how did they find using them, Josh?
So I didn't speak to anybody that was using the hub at the Welling hub, but I have spoken to several people who have used community hubs around the country and spoke to me about their experiences using them. And I would say that the main thing that came through it was which members that I was speaking to. The main thing that came across when I was speaking to them was that broadly they thought that community hubs were the right idea, right? This shared space where it doesn't matter who you bank with, you can go there and you can do your face-to-face banking, right? That's a good idea. The main issues that they raised with me were some of the stuff we've already spoken about. So like, for example, not being certain on what exactly you can do at a community hub, the sort of services that they provide. The other thing that came through a lot as well is that a lot of our members were unhappy about the fact that they can't just so in the past when they wanted to do face-to-face banking, they might just be like out in town doing some shopping, and then they'll just be like, oh, I'll just pop into the local bank branch because I need to do a bit of banking. So it was not something they ever really had to think about. But now with community hubs, you really need to plan around it. You need to look at when it's open. You need to look at which day your bank is going to be present. You need to look at, they might not be there all day either. They might only be there for half a day. You might need to book in advance. These are all little things that just kind of add to the difficulty around now doing face-to-face banking that wasn't previously a problem for a lot of people. The other thing that came through a lot, it was frustration that a lot of the time these community hubs where they're opening, not only are they there to serve that particular town, they're also serving the surrounding towns and villages. So it's not the case anymore that you can it's a 10-minute walk to your nearest local bank branch because of the town you're in. You have to take, for example, a 20-minute drive to the town one town over because that's where the community hub is. And, you know, it's been deemed that community hub is a good enough service provision to cover that town and all the surrounding towns. So it's now a much more kind of in-depth process compared to what it was before. I think that's one of the main things that came through to me is it's no longer an easy thing that you don't really have to think about anymore. You really have to put planning and thought into it. And as well, it still requires a certain level of digital literacy because you need to be able to, or it's helpful to be able to go online, find out where your nearest community hub is, find out what services are being offered because your bank should list what they offer at that particular community hub, although I don't think they're actually forced to. And then you also need to be able to call up and book an appointment because you don't want to turn up. Because that's when I went to the Welling hub, you know, there was just the one room. There was just the one community banking representative. It's not like, I remember, you know, when I used to go to my local branch when I was a lot younger, they had multiple rooms and multiple members of staff who you'd be able to speak to and would be able to help you with complex. There'd be a queue.
Yeah.
And even where there's, you know, 3 or 4 private rooms, there'd still be a queue to use them. So if there's only the one room, or even if there's 2 rooms, it's a much more in-depth process.
And I suppose it does feel like the elephant in the room is that it's quite difficult for any vulnerable customers if, you know, you can't drive to one of these hubs,
Yes, exactly.
or if you don't have the kind of minimum level of digital literacy that you just spoke about.
Or if you're in an area where public transport isn't great.
I mean, I guess that leads me to the question, do banks need to be doing more? And Chiara, you're nodding. Do you want to start?
I do think they need to do more. I think we've said this before. It's not about saying that online banking and mobile banking aren't great. They're great. The people that use it like it. It's convenient. It's quick. Broadly speaking, it's secure if you're careful. But you shouldn't be penalised if you don't want to use those services. Telephone banking, branch banking should be fit for purpose. And I'm concerned that they're not, or that they're increasingly not. One woman I spoke to, she stayed with me because she was genuinely scared that her bank would find out that she had the internet, which really shocked me. I'm not saying that her bank obviously would have done this, but I think it's interesting that her fear was that if the bank found out that she had the internet at home, which she used for emailing her family and a bit of online shopping, that they would force her to use online or mobile banking. And she just doesn't want to use it. She doesn't feel confident. She doesn't understand the security systems that are being used. She's nervous. She shouldn't be forced to do it. She's perfectly happy doing telephone banking, but those hours have been reduced. It's more difficult for her to do her telephone banking now because the hours have been heavily reduced. And I think I just want banks to remember that, internet use doesn't mean that you're confident or capable when it comes to digital banking. And also that you shouldn't forget your very loyal customers who've been banking with you for decades, who want to use telephone banking and want the standards of service to stay the same.
I mean, very well put. And it's undeniable that I think, banks do need to do more. I mean, in the meantime, Josh, you can apply for a hub in your area. So talk us through how that works.
Yeah, that's right. So the community hub in Welling actually came about through a community, like a campaign, which you can do. And I mean, the one in Welling was led by local politicians, but anybody can put in a request for a community hub in your area. And all you have to do is go to link.co.uk. Link are they manage all the vast majority of the ATMs in the UK, but they also have responsibility for assessing an area to see if it needs a new ATM or if it needs a community banking hub. So all you have to do is go to their website.
There is some irony of having to go to a website for this, isn't there?
Yeah, indeed. So it does require a level of data literacy. Yes, indeed. You have to go to the website. You have to fill out a form. And basically, you need to be able to explain why you think your area needs a community hub. And it's helpful to put in as much information as possible about what services previously existed in the area and what services have been lost. What should happen from there is Link should assess the area to see what services there were, what services have been lost, what services they think it requires. And if they think that it may require additional banking services, they should do an on-site visit where they'll come and they'll actually physically assess the area. And if they then decide that additional cash services are needed, they should make a final recommendation for, it could be an ATM, it could be a full-on community banking hub. And they have a set of criteria that they go through when deciding which areas should have what. But if they decide that a hub is warranted, they then pass that across to Cash Access UK, which then should continue and should confirm a site and should start planning one in your area. And I mean, this can take a little while. It should take anywhere sort of up to a year and a half, something like that. So it's not going to be a super quick process, but it is something that anybody can do.
Thank you, Josh, and we'll get a link to that in the description of today's show. And thank you too to Chiara for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media at Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.